What's up, Rush? Your boy, Mike Muse. Welcome to another episode of the Mike Muse Show. If you see my smile is big, I think you guys know that I have a Kool-Aid smile. You know I really love the next guest that is coming. So I'm going to try and keep my smile contained. I'm going to try and keep the conversation linear because this dude, like, legit is a homie in my head. I literally feel like we're best friends. And so I may act like this is a very casual conversation. So just join in whenever you feel free. This man doesn't need much of an introduction. You guys loved him from our previous conversations, and you guys still talk to me about the conversation. The one and only Kirk Franklin. What's happening, Kirk?
What up, boy? What up, boy? You're looking all glossy. You're just looking glossy and shiny. I love it. I love it.
Man, that's like because of you, man. Like, you came to the studio last time, buff, fit, 0% body fat. I was like, well, I got to do something better with my life. I need to drink more water. I need to pick up some weight.
Listen, I got a little Rona on my belly right now, Doc, because those first few months of the pandemic, man, it was rough. Yeah, but I'm glad to see you. You're looking sharp, but I bet you $1 million you ain't got no pants on and you ain't got no shoes on. I ain't stupid. I know good and well you probably sitting there in your boxer drawers with some house shoes. Maybe with one sock on, just one sock on. I ain't stupid.
Bruh, no lie. I literally have on red gym shorts, right? And literally like house shoes, like legit. Like,
you feel me?
And the house shoes just came from Amazon 2 days ago. It took me 3 days to find these house shoes. Yes. So I want the furry kind so my feet could be warm. And I didn't want the slide-ons. I want the kind that kind of wrap the ankles, because my feet get cold.
I love it. I love it, Doc. Woo!
Bro, for you to call me out like that is like absolutely amazing, Kurt. Dude, and speaking of being called out, I just did a conversation, audience show this by now. It ran on Friday with ABC. So, Kurt, we made some history in multiple ways. It was the first time there was an all-Black male panel on a major network. If you think about it, there isn't like one Black man on the major network in terms of opinion-based panel. I think like The View, I think like The Talk. But to have 4 Negroes on there, it was very historic. The conversation's been amazing. But Kurt, I think I might got into a little bit of trouble. So this is kind of, I know you're here for me to interview you, but I might be using you as a redemption tool because we talked about the Black church. First of all, ladies and gentlemen, Kirk Franklin is here because he's incredible. Besides his music, Kurt has decided to become a competitor of mine and get into the talk space. So, Kurt, I mean, you just can't let a brother be, right? Like, I can't sing. I can't dance, right? And then now you got to get into the talk space.
Oh, God, that's so funny. You're funny. So what's your question? What is your question?
He's promote his podcast, The Good Words with Kirk Franklin. So we're going to get to that in a second. But Kurt, so we've been doing a lot with mental health. It's just, we mentioned COVID-19 and the pandemic and how we've been kind of just going through so many different difficult phases in our life, whether it's health, whether it's our finances, whether it's job loss, whether it's our kids, K through 12, are struggling, being removed from the social dynamic of it. And so we got into the narrative of mental health and therapy and Black folks going to see a therapist or a psychiatrist. And so I brought into the conversation the reason why we hesitate going to see a therapist and a psychologist is because we've been taught within the Black church that there is this narrative that therapy and seeing a psychiatrist is counterintuitive to religion, right? It's in opposing forces and factors. I'm just curious on like what your thoughts is about how the Black church perceives therapy and how we should look at therapy as we're going through so many difficult, challenging times right now.
Well, first of all, the Black church has always been a snapshot of the African American experience. It has been this place of social engagement during segregated times where people of color could go and feel good about themselves to kind of put on something nice and to be inspired. It was a place of uniformity during some of the most polarizing times that we faced as a country. And And at the same time, it is also a snapshot of the ideals and the social constructs of what Black people feel in general about many levels of life. You didn't even have to go to church to be a Black person in the 20th, 19th, 20th century that didn't encourage your uncle to go turn himself in when he was molesting your daughter. And so that's not a church construct. That was a framework that a lot of Black people during that era worked from. They were scared of the police, and so they never dealt with a lot of the issues that were plaguing a lot of the Black homes internally. We always had that cousin that was a little different, and we just say, "Oh, cousin Ray just crazy." Y'all know cousin Ray, but it's like, well, no, cousin Ray cutting on himself at the barbecue. You know what? Y'all get him some turpentine and y'all get him some Band-Aids. He'd be all right. And
again,
that's not. Yeah, some tussin. Y'all post some tussin on the cousin Ray. But that had nothing to do with the church. So a lot of that framework was brought into the church, and then during a time where Black pastors were not able to go to seminaries and to divinity schools because of the laws that are still ignorant to me. I'm trying to figure out, what were you reading in the Bible that you aligned yourself with not allowing Black and brown people to go to Bible school? And so what that did is that birthed a lot of biblical illiteracy in the African American communities. So we are working from that type of construct when we talk about why the Black church was not able to scientifically and academically engage with its people on a deeper level. It is just because it was just a continuum of what was happening in the Black experience at that time.
Kirk, I've never heard it put in that perspective. I've never heard that terminology, biblical illiteracy. And you kind of just struck something I wasn't even thinking about or going in, because of how racism has been constructed. I was watching a special recently on the History Channel about the Tuskegee Airmen. And I just use a neutral example really quickly. And I was just thinking about how these Black men had to go fight over in World War II for America and for a country. When they came back, didn't see them as whole. And then also, too, prevented us from all the rights and privileges that the other white soldiers did with the GI Bill, with being able to afford free college tuition to get to college, but we couldn't get into college because of the discriminatory practices and the home loans and mortgages that were guaranteed to the white soldiers. But the Black soldiers couldn't get it because of all the discriminatory practices that happens in banking and finance. So, Kirk, that left us out building generational wealth for our families. That goes back, Kirk, to the conversation I've been having about generational wealth with our farmlands back in the 1900s. I love you, Kirk, because you're such a fan of history, and I love that about you. I see why you have your podcast. I'm excited for that. We think about the early 1900s and the Black farming. I pay attention to the Agriculture Committee in the Senate. We had 925,000 farmers, Black farmers back then. Now we're only down to 35,000. Over 13 million acres has been stolen from Black Americans in farming. But that's just not about land, Kirk. That's also about, we couldn't use that land as loan and collateral for our children to go to college for loans. So we got stripped of that ability for generational wealth because of that, which I didn't think about the construct of how that impacted us from a religious perspective. The fact that our biblical leaders couldn't go to biblical school to learn the root words, right? The Latin definitions, right? Like the breaking down of these words that we had no understanding. So we're kind of making shit up as we go, right?
And so what it does is that you are absolutely right. And so without that context, it makes Christianity and the Black church look duplicitous, when the truth is that there is a lot of historic reasons that have always polarized what people from politics, from economic equity, from social equity, and from academic equity. When you come to talking about a book of antiquity that is over 2,000 years old, that has literature, history, poetry. It also has apocryphy, and so you have all of these academic components being thrust on men and women with not even a clear understanding of how to balance a checkbook.
Yes. But I didn't even think about that. And at the time, when you think about it, not able to read or write, right? Like I had that lineage with my my great uncle, who I knew, Uncle Clyde. Uncle Clyde couldn't read or write. Right? Uncle Clyde could not read or write. And so we're still in that era. And Dan, Kurt, this is really good, because when we think about religion, even you brought this up, and what I do love about the Black church, and I would never disavow or go anything. I love the Black church. I still
yeah.
But the Black church, I've always looked at. I've always said it always gave people a sense of dignity, right?
Yes.
You could be the doctor Monday through Friday, or you could be the janitor, the custodian Monday through Friday. But on Sunday, both men are wearing suits, and both men are leading praise and worship or devotion, or both men are deacons. So there's the levity of a parody that it gives, and making a Black man in particular feel whole, and gives purpose for a Black woman to look so fly and beautiful just for one day out of the week. So it's also too a country club. So I've always looked at it, Kurt, from like this very social construct of what it means for our community. Like it's a very country club meets community center. That's how I've always viewed it. But I never looked at it from two sides of the coin of scholarship. One, scholarly and or lack of scholarship, right?
Amen.
Because of the fact that we've been prevented from learning the teachings of the scholarship. Because you're right, Kurt, like the Old Testament is complicated and very confusing. And how do you keep track of the lineages? And how do you know when the New Testament goes back to the Old Testament? That goes to like critical discernment, critical thinking. That goes back to training. Everybody has to train. I went to school for industrial engineering. I had to be trained on that. Like I just didn't come out the gate like, yo, I know process. You know what I mean? I had to learn the way of learning. So then I get passed down.
I agree. And so that's why I think that it is very important to be able to acknowledge the flaws and the mistakes that have happened in the construct of religion. First of all, religion is a very destructive ideal, because religion basically is man's attempt to define God. And the reason why I subscribe to Christianity, not the weaponized version of Western Christianity, but the teachings of Jesus Christ, is because Christianity is God defining himself for himself. And not allowing you to have this ambiguous approach that only benefits you. For example, like, do you know that in England, there is a denomination in England called the Church of England? Have you heard of the Church of England?
Yeah.
Do you know that the Church of England was started because the king at the time was having an affair, and he was not able to divorce his wife to marry his mistress because the Catholic Church would not allow him to. So this fool, this Negro, goes and starts his own denomination. Did you know that's how the Church of England started? So when you have doctrine and dogma and religion all entering into the lexicon of the idea of God, instead of allowing a sovereign God to paint the beautiful tapestry of himself.
Yes.
And that's why I subscribe to Christianity, because it's very simple. For God so loved the world.
Come on.
Then he gave his only son.
Come on now.
Whosoever believes. And watch it, God so loved the world. So everybody in the world.
Come on now.
The world to give his only son, that whosoever should believe in his son shall not perish and have everlasting life. It is the most beautiful love story, but in the hands of wicked man that is full of depravity, it becomes what's beneficial to that man who holds the paper.
It's the same thing with the Oval Office. President Obama said something really profound years ago. He said the Oval Office doesn't define you. He said the Oval Office brings out whatever is inside of you, right? And amplifies it because of power, right? Politics is power. Religion is power. Just how you notice it. I'm going to go further. I didn't know about that story of how the Church of England got started no lie, Kirk, over the holiday break, my mom loves the royal family. She literally thinks we're British. I don't know how that happened, but that's a whole other conversation for another day. But so we binged The Crown. And through The Crown, I literally learned that the queen, or whoever is the head, queen or queen at the time, is bigger than the bishop of the church. And that the bishop or the head reports to the crown. And I'm like, how does that work? Like, how does a spiritual leader ordained by God, supposedly, then report to the queen? I mean, does then the queen report to God? I mean, it was just the weirdest thing I learned about holidays. So it's interesting. It now makes sense to me because I didn't know about the connection of how the Church of England even got started. Right. And so it's wild. And then it makes sense now. So I interviewed, oh my God, I'm dropping his name right now, but the brother, Archbishop, who married Meghan and Harry.
Oh, yeah.
Fantastic brother, dynamic. I love him. And so he and I, so it makes sense for that. He officiated that aspect of it. So Kurt, like that's kind of like aha moment, as Oprah says, I'm having right now. Like, it kind of messes me up. Like when it comes to that, I'm actually having a redemption moment, even of myself, as we're talking here, Kurt, about, and here I am, the main Negro who's always talking about seeking therapy, seeking counseling, giving yourself grace, right? And here I am, not even thinking about the grace that needs to be extended to the Black church when it comes to the dynamics of scholarly discourse, when it comes to biblical teachings, and then how that also impacts community and essentially social work, because our ministers have to be biblical scholars, leaders, and social workers, at the same time. And that's the burden that falls on the Black church, unfortunately, right?
So and the Black churches had to do it, and the Black churches had to do it on its own. It's had to do it on its own. So that leaves room for a lot of dysfunction. While at the same time, it has also been the light that has carried our people through some, and that's so if you want to talk about, and I'm so honored to have this conversation with you just because you're giving me a lot of dope illumination myself. You want to talk about any moments that can be aha moments for the agnostic or the atheist, or for those that their religion is their intelligence. The same religion that was used to oppress a group of people ended up being the same religion that they chose to use to be their greatest strength in their greatest, darkest times. That, to me, is the greatest revelation of the authenticity of the truth of this teaching, because you don't find that in any other construct of humanity. You don't find that in Islam. You don't find that in Buddhism. You don't find that in Hinduism, where a religion that was used to enslave people, to rip them of their humanity, they took that religion, they took that same message that was weaponized, that was used to even colonize them, and they used it as the "we shall overcome" message that Dr. King used to be able to be the Moses of our generation. But it was the same message. It was the same message that empowered. So to me, it brings so much validation. Now, I believe there's enough scholarship to argue for the legitimacy of Jesus Christ on its own. But to me, if you want to pull on a Negro soul, that shows me how great God is and how real He is. That the same God that you used to knock me down was the same God I used to pull me up.
Yes. Brother, there's a scene in this show called, I love pop culture, as you can see. I think pop culture is a mirror to society. Anyways, there's a scene in The Good Lord Bird, and it's also a book. And there's a scene between this slave owner, let's just say, and a slave, when the slave is being disruptive, right? And the slave owner, who's also the preacher, is sent to put her in her place. And they have this powerful moment at the table. They're sitting across from each other, and it illuminates what you're saying. She says, the same God that is allowing you to feel like it's okay to enslave me is the same God that's allowing me to forgive you for what you're about to do to me. which is the lyncher, right? And so it really illuminates what you're saying about the power of it. And so this is why I don't want the conversation to get lost, because for far too often, we're always on our soapboxes. And my audience, I think you're getting to know me a little bit more, Kirk. I'm not a soapbox guy. So I want to land somewhere with this on this subject before we move on to you and all the things that you're working on. And this is a big question, to be honest with you. And you and I think, are both having revelation throughout this conversation, which is really beautiful. And I don't think there is a right answer, and we don't have to solve it now. But how do we work towards allowing grace, but also to an undoing of the biblical illiteracy that has been done within the Black church in order to bring about more healing of the Black church, to not necessarily my goal isn't to bring people back into the fold or anything of that. I'm not an evangelist, right? But just to give more understanding, because I believe the biggest tenement that gets lost is agape love of religion, right? And that is the biggest commandment of them all. I believe God is real, right? And there's been so many instances in my life that you can't tell me he ain't real or is not existing. Amen. So how do we begin to resolve, this biblical illiteracy that has created so many untruths that are not biblically sound, right? And I know that's a big question, but I'm just thinking about it just now, and we don't have to answer it, but how do we begin to do it?
Yes, I think that first of all, that some of it is already beginning. There are some young African-American theologians that come from academia that have high biblical IQs. There's the Charlie Dates out of Chicago. There is the Eric Mason out of Philadelphia. That are strong theological minds that understand the need of bringing a certain sense of academic truth and historical context to us as Black people and our role, as well as being able to understand that within the framework of society, that there's a both and. There's not an either or, that there's a both and. As a matter of fact, I was in therapy just yesterday with my therapist. I went twice since the pandemic. I started going back, and it's been healing for me. And he's a Christian therapist. I always subscribe to a Christian trained therapist, not just a Christian deacon who say, God called me a therapist. I'm talking about people that are doctorates, that have PhD, somebody, but their lens is monolithic, because for me, we're not just body, we're also soul. And because we're made up of mind, body, and soul, they all work in harmony. And if they're all not hitting on all the same cylinders, they can become, one can become an antagonist of the other. Yeah. And so I believe that it is happening. Even me myself, over a decade, I became a student of apologetics. I am even working with a couple of institutions of higher learning to be able to establish a syllabus for urban apologetics. I think that it's very important for people of color to know why they believe what they believe, and not only what they believe, but why they believe it, and to be able to intellectually, intelligently argue for the legitimacy of their faith, not just because it's because of how I feel or because what the preachers say. Well, my mama says, like, no, you need to know why you believe what you believe, and in the context of a religion that has had its own sins during the sojourn of us as people of color. So we've got to be able to separate the teachings of Jesus Christ from the weaponization of Western Christianity.
Come on now. So Kirk, I fancy myself as a smart man, but I'm also smart enough to know what I don't know. So when you say apologetics, I don't know what that, I think I picked it up in the context of your statement.
Got it.
Clearly define apologetics for those who may not know.
Yes,
I don't know.
Yes, sir. No. I'd be honest too. Apologetics is the discipline of being able to intelligently, intellectually, academically argue for the teachings of what one believes in.
Wow, that's good. And Kirk, so there's like courses you're studying for that right now?
Yes. There are many great apologists. There is a guy, Oh man, he has a book. Um, there is a book written by a white professor that is a Yale guy. He's either a Yale guy or a Princeton guy. He's deceased now, and he has a book called "How Africa Reshaped the Christian Mind." And
Ooh.
he's talking about how Europe did not influence Africa. Africa historically influenced Europe with Christianity. That
Ooh.
that that 2 centuries before Constantine, there were African Christians in the sub-Sahara parts of Africa that were Christians. Augustine, Tertullian, Origen, that the disciple Mark started his first church in Alexandria. That Alexandria had its first church in North Africa by one of the living disciples, Mark. And so these were people that were the architects of what we know as 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 systematic Christianity. These were the guys that taught Christianity. Origen, Augustine, Tertullian. These are the fathers of the Christian faith, and we don't even know that they are men of color because of revisionist history.
Yes.
Because of revisionist history, we think that Europe influenced Africa with Christianity. Do you know that there were African priests that were taken on the slave ships during the transatlantic slave trade, that some of the white priests had to write letters to some of those Dutch slave owners saying, you do know that some of these guys that you took, they were free priests in West Africa that were teaching Christianity before the slave ships even got there.
Wow.
And those guys need to be returned because they're priests. They are Christian priests. So there were already Christians on the slave ship when they landed in Charleston.
Dude, you're blowing me away with these revelations. And my audience knows I'm a lover of history. And so I want us to, and I'll reach out to your team. I would love to do a conversation later on in the year with you around that particular subject specifically, because the part of history that I'm most obsessed with is the Greco-Roman time period. And what you're doing is you're bringing in another element to that, because when you think about, Greece, mathematics, there's this narrative that it was kind of founded from there, but you have to take it to Egypt, right? And then Africa and the sub-Saharan Africa. So I think there is this interesting intersectionality between what you're discussing to the period of history that I love, and then how then do we bring that together to illuminate everything that you just brought to pass, which is why I'm always in favor of our conversations, Kirk, because you bring history, and also too, man, just salute to you just as a personal note, just in the spirit of this conversation. You have always taken so many hits, right, brother? Like, you've always been ahead of the curve, right? You have always come at this from you've made church almost a lifestyle. And what I mean by that is you made it cool just to be freedom to express however you choose to worship, high spirited. I think I want to dance, with your music, right? But that was always taught to always be more restrictive, right, in worship, right, like to be more controlled, right, in how you do it. And the melody had to have a certain type of melody with a certain type of chords, right, with a certain type of organ. And so you kind of free that construct up to me. And so just salute to you for kind of going out front and taking hits. I'm curious how you're going to take these hits with apologeticness. I can't wait for that conversation. So thank you, Kirk, with that being said. I want to make sure my audience knows as we conclude about your podcast, The Good Words with Kirk Franklin. Talk to us how we can find it. Talk to us about why you want to start it. Clearly, you have so much to say, but talk to me a little bit about why you want to start it as we close.
Well, first of all, I need to give you my address so you can send me that ring. I think that ring is fire, player. That ring.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
That's super dope.
Thank you.
And I have really enjoyed our conversation as well, because I think that it's so important that there can be a level of intelligence to our Christian faith that a lot of times has been mocked by those that feel that we are misled and misinformed about what we believe. And so to be able to give historic academic context to a God that has saved my soul. And you know, like Nana said, he picked me up and turned me around, placed my feet on solid ground. You know,
Hey,
yeah, you know, that he's able to be in academia as well as in Shanae's house, right?
get him on out.
You know what I'm saying? That's the duality of how incredible he is. And so with the podcast, Good Words, is not necessarily within the context of this. It's not deep theological conversations as much as it is engaging culture with faith. Is I think that a lot of times we think that those are misnomers and that they cannot coexist, that they can be bedfellows, right? That we can interview people that have had high level of success and to be able to pull back. What did you believe in the midst of that? Do you believe? Do you not believe? Why don't you believe? Did you once believe that? How did you lose that? How does that lead the subject matter of what you choose as your art form, how you communicate your art form, and where are you right now when it comes to, does God exist in the framework of who you are as an individual? And so these are conversations we're having with Pharrell, we're having them with Chance the Rapper. Had a great conversation with Glennon Doyle. I'm having conversations with Kelly Rowland, with her. I'm interviewing somebody super incredible today, an A-list actor that contacted us. They wanted to be on the podcast. This is an Academy Award winning person and very humble. And so, you know, we're just having conversations where there's this collision of swag and spiritual, and how they collide, and what happens at the intersection of it.
I love that. That is beautiful. Shout out to Kelly Rowland. Happy birthday. That's going to be a great conversation. I can only imagine. Kirk, how can people, I love that we never talk about faith and pop culture and the intersectionality of it. I think it is a huge intersection that dovetails into so many areas. So I salute you for, again, leading the way again, my brother. How can people find this?
Yes, sir. Wherever you get your podcast, Apple Podcast, every platform that gives you the option to listen to podcasts, I'm there. And so I hope you enjoy it. And it's called Good Words with Kirk Franklin.
Ladies and gentlemen, make sure you check Kirk Franklin out. Good Words with Kirk Franklin. I mean, if nothing else, he's going to be with Pharrell. You're going to get some good skincare routine regimen, because that Pharrell does not freaking age. And so I don't know how it's even possible. Kirk Franklin, thank you as always for coming to the Mike Muse Show. I always love our conversation. Thank you for being you. And I also thank you for giving your gift of brilliancy, man.